Well, it's the hardy few, right? We're getting down to it. I can't thank Waza and the Detroit staff of Ron and Stephanie and Scott for creating this opportunity and this forum for us. I think it's been a great 3 days. I know we're coming down the home stretch here. We're between you guys and closing statements. So, and wine, yes. It's always a dangerous place to be. I came into this meeting not quite sure what to expect, knowing it's a really important time for zoos and aquariums, about an incredibly important part of what we do. And I'm coming out of it now 3 days later thinking, it's all hands on deck about this issue. It's all hands on deck about a lot of the things that we saw here. Every single data point that we saw, whether it was a slide, whether it was a graph, about the exploding human population and the pressure that it's putting on animals all over the world. It's an emergency issue that's going to take everybody in this room working together to make any kind of dent in that. And I applaud you guys for putting this together. I think it's a great dialogue, and hopefully there's common ground here that we can work on some of these things. The session yesterday where the vaquita discussion came up, I thought was very interesting because it was almost like strange bedfellows were working towards a goal, reluctantly in some way, but knowing that, hey, this is our last-ditch effort for this animal, and we're going to work together to try and do that. I just see lots more of those kinds of issues coming down the pike for us, so we better figure this out very quickly. We've got a great panel up here that really what we're going to try and do today is just kind of what are our takeaways, what are we going to take home with us from this, and how do we apply some of this. Just here to my right is Jim Brahini. He's the EVP and General Director of WCS Zoo and Aquarium Programs. Professor Theo Pagel, from the CEO of the Cologne Zoo. Dr. Joel Parrott, from President and CEO of the Oakland Zoo. And Peggy Sloan, who's the Director of the North Carolina Aquarium at Fort Fisher. So I'm going to start just with a general question about general impressions. Jimmy, I'm going to start with you. What are your general impressions of the last 3 days?
I'm really glad I came, and the impression that I'm going to leave with is one that I actually had when I came because of recent experiences, but it's been reinforced. I've been privileged enough to be on the AZA board now for a couple of years and work with the board, AZA, in trying to design a way forward. And one thing that we talk about all the time, and a word that we started to use and introduce a lot, is relevance, right? And we need to figure out a way that we're going to be relevant to people in the 21st century, in their life. Because I think too many people think of zoos and aquariums as kind of a Victorian throwback where, our main function and our main mission is to keep animals in cages. I don't mean cages in the derogatory way. I mean just to keep animals in enclosures. And, a lot of the conversation the first day, I think the philosophy of that was, that if we're going to keep animals captive, we owe them the best life that we can do, and we have to be concerned about wellness and well-being. And I think that's true, and I think we're all committed to that, and I don't think any reasonable person would argue that point, right? And if there's a person in our profession that doesn't believe that, they shouldn't be in our profession. What I wish that was stated more clearly in the beginning, and I think this is a problem because so much of our problem is our own fault, and I take responsibility. And you're starting to hear it here. We hear it in conferences all the time. We are not good at telling our story. We don't tell our story, and we have to get better. If we don't tell people what we do, they're not going to know. So. I don't want to go on, I apologize. But so the philosophy, right? somebody from the zoo and aquarium community, when we were talking about philosophy, should have, on the first day, or I should have, said, our goal is not just to keep animals in cages and keep them well. That is not my goal. I do not want to run, a well-run menagerie. That's not what I want to do. Our goal is to keep animals well, to keep them in exhibits that teach, explain, inspire, dynamic exhibits that kind of pull people in to see these animals, the wonder of nature, to be in awe, have the appropriate level of awe of these species, and then want to join in our mission to save them in the wild, right? So yes, we keep animals in cages, and yes, we are absolutely responsible for keeping them well and giving the best level of well-being and welfare we can. But we do it for a higher purpose than that. We do it to connect those animals who are ambassadors for their species, who tell a story of the conservation challenges that these animals and species face in the wild, and who then can help us inspire people to join us. And one other thing, it has to be said, AZA Zoos and Aquariums, $186 million a year directly to field conservation, the conservation of species in the wild. It's going up incrementally every year. Soon we're going to be able to say $200 million a year. That's $1 billion for conservation every 5 years from one organization. There's not too many other people that can say they're doing that. And that's something we should be proud of, and that's something that we should tout, and that's something that we should use to get people to join with us in our mission.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy. Joel, I'm going to throw the next question to you. I know you've been an animal welfare advocate in zoos for a long time. This meeting, did it meet your expectations?
Yeah, I think what has really energized me is to see the size of the group that's now shown up. I know Ron and I go way back, and there was a time when it felt like it was there weren't many of us showing this much interest. But I think as animal welfare takes its proper role in our consciousness about what we are as zoos, it's really been a long time desire of ours to, on a couple levels. First of all, I think is the importance that I think it was early for me to realize that bad zoos aren't the only threat to good zoos. Bad exhibits in a good zoo is a threat to the good zoo. And so before we expanded at the Oakland Zoo, which is underway, we were committed to tearing out all the old, garbage, the bad exhibits, the bad cages, the too small, the wrong collection, whatever it might have been. But we shoot ourselves in the foot if we don't make animal welfare at the top, among the top issues for us at all times. And the reason we shoot ourselves in the foot is because we're big advocates for wildlife. We care about wildlife. We're trying to save wildlife in the wild, and we're trying to show respect for that in the wild. But when we try to get on the soapbox and talk about respect and for the animals in the wild and why we need to preserve it, if you're not showing respect for your animals, and the public can pick up on it, and it's just a dehumanizing situation, or it's a concrete grotto or whatever it might be, they don't have to be a professional to know. They can't even articulate it. But if they see a bad animal exhibit in your zoo right next to your brand new $15 million project, that bad exhibit will haunt them, and it undermines our own credibility to have that while we're trying to recruit them to be advocates for animal in the wild. And so with that, when I see so many of you here, and I know it's just going to grow, and it's going to grow in the importance of our own AZA accreditation programming. It's going to grow in the interest that it's really going to benefit not only the animals, but it's going to benefit the institutions themselves. And it's something that is just very heartening for me to see, so many making it such a priority.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Theo, I'm going to put the question to you, kind of representing the international one here. Did this meet the expectations? You came a long way. You feeling good about it going back?
Yes, I think this conference has shown that WASA, for example, is on the right track. So the next meeting we will have in Berlin, and I hope to see a lot of you there, is about the relevance of zoos. Our time is now is the title. And we exactly want to do what Jim said before. We have to tell what we are doing. We are doing so many good things, and especially with the welfare. I can tell you in Germany, I have a license by the governmental authority following paragraph 11 animal welfare law. So I have got it from the official authorities that we are on the right track. It's not only that I have an EASA accreditation in my zoo or a lot of other colleagues. So we are doing a lot. And again, I would like to repeat what Jim said. We do so many good things. We are on the right track, but we have to tell it to the people. And I think what was very important for me is I got a lot of new ideas about research done with our animals here in captivity, or better say, human care. So what I would try is to take that home and keep the contacts and to find researchers in Germany, in Europe, all over the globe, working with us on the goal to keep the animals we have in our care under the best conditions and use them as ambassadors and use them wherever possible to reintroduce them to the wild and to educate people. That is why I've chosen to be a zoo director. I want to make the world a little bit better, and I think that is the goal of a lot of us sitting here in the room, probably all of us. So, yeah, was good.
Good. Peggy, same question to you, representing the aquarium side of things.
Yes, absolutely. This has been a tremendous opportunity to learn from colleagues in my profession and colleagues in the animal protection profession. And I've learned a lot from both sides. And I think that relevance is top of mind for all of us. And it's very clear that animal welfare is something that we care very much about. And when we talk about telling our stories and talking about the public, we can't forget that we have the opportunity to tell stories. And I'm only speaking in AZA numbers, so it's much larger when you consider WASA and the other organizations here. In AZA, our organizations see 54 million public school students a year. When they come through our zoos and aquariums, they're connecting with nature, sometimes for the only opportunity that they'll ever have. And if we want to foster animal welfare, we need to do that through that connection. And that will lead to better welfare, not just for the animals in our care, because it'll be a value that we foster, but also for animals in the wild. In addition to just seeing our animals, these kids learn about science, technology, engineering, art, and math in formal programs. We do graduate courses for students in college. We do campuses on our zoos and aquariums, on our campuses. We do schools on our campuses. So I think thinking about the relevance of what we do is always going to be important. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we remember all of our audiences. And we've talked a lot about how important it is to reach children. So I would say that it would never be my intention to become obsolete or to plan to ever not exist. We have got to be an important part of the experience of people everywhere, to be a good zoo and a good aquarium and to foster values that lead to better animal welfare.
So following up on one of the things that you mentioned there, because I feel like a little bit slighted on what we do on education through this process over the last few days. I feel like that's been downplayed a little bit. You want to elaborate a little more about the role of zoos in education and your feelings on that?
Well, again, we see a huge percentage of all the public school children in the United States, and many of them come through our institutions for free. And when they come, they often stay for a program aligned with state curriculum or national curriculum, and it's also repeated contact. It's not just a one-time visit. They become part of our community. They become part of what we do. And I'm not sure if it's clear how much research has been done on the value of those visits and the impact of those visits. not just in the formal learning that leads to better school performance, but also in empathy. We've measured empathy in children as it relates to an experience at a zoo or an aquarium, and it's increased. And I think that one of the things that was really clear to me is we need to do a better job of telling our stories to each other. Because if there's a perception that aquariums and zoos don't educate, that's flat out wrong. And I'm sorry that we haven't done a better job of sharing that, and we'll work on that in the
Again,
future.
it gets back to the storytelling, or telling our story, getting it out there. So, Jimmy, when you get back to the Bronx on Monday, one thing that you're going to take from this meeting that you're going to put at the top of the list?
I found the media discussion this morning really helpful. I mean, we've tried to be more aggressive about marketing stories that are more substantive than just we have a cute baby animal. But, you know, there's internal pushback from that, and there's pushback from the media also. I think what I'm going to do is look more critically at things that we can do where we can invite somebody in to help us tell that story. You know, we're a very conservative organization, WCS. We always have been, and you know, recently we did the zoo with Animal Planet, and you know, that was a real culture shock for us because part of the deal was we gave the producers on the film crew just absolute access to everything that we did, and you know, some people were very hesitant about doing that, and you know, it worked out really well for us. Animal Planet turned out to be a great partner. What was really great was, and I don't know the terms, but if they're millennials or Gen Xers or whoever, but a lot of the people that worked on the cruise were young people, and you know, in New York, it's hard to find work and you have to pay your rent, so. A lot of these people just took the job because they needed to eat and they needed to pay their rent. And so many, we had a crew of about 40 people, 2 crews, 40 people that worked with us for 8 months. And so many of these young people that were involved in doing the show with us came up to us and said, you know, I have to tell you, I really didn't like zoos. You know, I didn't want this job because it was to do with a zoo, but I had to pay my rent. And so I took it. And by coming and working with us and meeting our people and seeing the caring and all that, the relationships between the people and the animals and the level of care they got, they actually became our advocates and would tell me when I was filming, you know, oh, you know what you should really highlight, or you know what we should say, whatever. And so I felt really hopeful because, you know, here are people that told me that they just didn't, you know, they didn't think we were relevant. They didn't think we did anything that they thought was a positive contribution. And then just coming, experience us being embedded, you know, we won them over. So I said, well, you know, there is a benefit in getting people together. There is a benefit in talking and getting people with different viewpoints in the room because, I mean, that's a starting point. You have to do it.
And that transparency was worth it, to be able to let them into that. Joel, same question to you. On Monday, when you get back to Oakland, what are you going to put at the top of the list?
Well, there are a couple things. I think, I think getting that word out about what we do on the animal welfare side, too. You know, we probably could do more about signage, about kind of explaining what we're doing in this exhibit with these animals to improve for their welfare. It might be explaining enrichment toys that are out there. It might be explaining the social dynamics or the size or the recreation of a natural exhibit. All that we take for granted, you know, but if we aren't really communicating it, not only are we not serving ourselves, but they are also really missing an entire dimension of what we do. So I think that's what I'm going to take with me the most as soon as I get back. I do want to mention on the media side, though, there is one thing we do in Oakland that when a reporter comes out, you know, we try to really give them full access, always tell the truth, try to keep them interested. For our budget, they represent our way to communicate with the public, really, because we don't really have an advertising budget of significance. And so our partnership with the media is what gives us the exposure into the community that is really the only way we can keep cropping up in the public's mind. And one trick we use, hopefully the reporters aren't still here, but the one trick we use is that if a reporter comes out to do a story, we try to befriend them immediately and offer them, yeah, you ought to come out, bring your family out, and we'll let you in, then you can feed the giraffe, you'll love it, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden they become bonded to us, and they will call us if there's an incident in another zoo somewhere. They'll call us for expertise. They'll come out when we have something special that's happening. They will if they can, and they'll go back and advocate with their editor if they can. But it's really becoming socially, in our own way, friends with them, so that they want the zoo to succeed. They see what we do. They see what the compassion is that we have for our animals. When they see all that, they want to help. And all of a sudden you've got a media that is willing to inject you on a slow news day, come out and cover the fact we give pumpkins to our animals after Halloween, and they'll do that story rather than just bypassing us. And all of a sudden, when there's a lion carrying a pumpkin on the cover of the newspaper or in their media outlets, then suddenly people know there's an Oakland Zoo, and it might be a fun thing to do this weekend, that type of thing, rather than us just trying to achieve the same thing by running ads. But anyway, so I think the main thing will be to come back and try to push this message on behalf of zoos to our own community, to make them realize that we do care very much about the quality of life of the animals that we have.
Okay, switching gears just a second here. Kind of the underlying theme of a lot of what we've heard has been common ground and trying to find that common ground. Theo, did you feel that? Did you see the opportunities for working together with diverse opinions about legislation, about roadside zoos, anything like that you want to comment on?
I would say yes and no. So there is common ground. The question is there common ground enough to work on in all levels? I think there is a common ground in a lot of issues. So we are, as we heard during the last 3 days, we all take care of animals. So we want to have healthy animals. We want to have happy animals. Doesn't matter whether you see it in your eyes or not. I would prefer to have some really data, scientific data to get that checked. I think it is good that we talk together and that we go on together to talk, but I would like to see that we may go to other areas like Europe or to Asia to have such conferences, because I think the main problem I see during this conference here is that probably all of us who are here know why we are here, and the others making all the problems, the roadside zoos, they are not here. They have no idea what we are talking about, and we have to get to them and to get to involve them, and maybe we have to find ways together with the welfare community and the welfare community with a wild animal background, so that we all together on this common ground we have go for the goals to solve the major problems we are focusing. Yeah.
Peggy, I'm going to throw that same question to you, kind of from the aquarium view. Did you see common ground here on things you can work on?
Yes, and it's probably not much of an aquarium view. I think it's more of a world view on animals. And I'm going to borrow from David Fraser, who was just wonderful, and ask you all if you agree that the best state of welfare for animals is living wild in a healthy, intact ecosystem. Raise your hand. Now keep it up if you think that's an option for most of the animals that you know. So I think that we've heard a lot about how little wild there is left out there. And we've heard a lot about the extinction crisis that we're in and how important it is that we try to reverse that and that we work together to that end, or we all fail. And so we've challenged ourselves in the zoo and aquarium community to contribute to saving animals in the wild. So I would challenge all of us, all of our partners, in whatever you're doing, that some of your focus on animal welfare be funneled through contributing to saving animals in the wild. Because if that's the end state we want for animal welfare, then that's one of the things that we can all do, and that's common ground that we can all share, and maybe we can leverage our impact in that way, because that's not controversial to me.
Okay. So just as a general, as we finishing up down the home stretch here, kind of to help these guys as we put these things together, is there anything you'd want to change about this symposium, this conference? Jimmy, start with you.
I thought it was great. I think that it's unfortunate, a lot of people kind of left and didn't stay till the end. And perhaps the only thing I would have changed is allowed more time for discussion the first day when everybody was here, and because I think there were people that wanted to have meaningful discussion, and I don't think there was enough time built in for that. But that was the only thing.
Okay. Dale, anything?
Yeah, so I would also think maybe 2 days with more intensive discussions are better, and I would like to see this conference being held in a different area of the world. As I said before, I would love to see such a conference in Europe or in Southeast Asia, where we have different problems, where we have different backgrounds, and where we probably can get different people to this auditorium.
Joel?
I would say probably start to now identify some of the criteria that are measurable and start to have a couple of scientific papers put into the program so that it actually starts to move from an understanding of what we need to do for welfare to how we can do it.
Becky, anything you want to?
Well, I'd like to see more aquarium participation, and that's on us.
Yeah, I think from my point, I think the condensing it down, I think into the two solid days would be good, because it is really hard for everybody to try and get that amount of time. But I think the trying to get that interaction with the dialogue, I think, is the most important thing. I've really enjoyed the roundtable discussions that we've had, of the things that we've had at the informal stuff, and also, Ron, I got to say, the incredible catering and stuff that you guys have done. The facilities it's been terrific. You guys have really been terrific hosts on that. Give a round of applause to them. So, anything anybody wants to add in closing?
The only thing I did, one of my observations, because I have been in it back since we had elephant issues, and I was working with PAWS and the Humane Society towards animal welfare issues. I think what's really important, I don't see at all a divisive group. This is nothing compared to what it used to be like when, in the earlier days, I'd speak to audiences, and it was members of the audience who wanted zoos to be gone. I even spoke to try this one, an animal rights class in San Francisco State University. I went and spoke to that, and they ate me for lunch, on that one, and trying to justify why we need zoos. But then the next year, for some reason, they invited me back, and I went in with a different angle. Yeah, I went in with a different angle. I talked about how, we've got an environmental crisis that is overwhelming us all. That was the opening approach. And that the zoo is just one of the vehicles, one of the forums to make a difference in humanity, to change the direction it's going. At the end of that one, they collected money and gave me a donation. Same class. But anyway, as a group, I think we have so much commonality that we do need to focus on all the other ills that are out there, whether it's the scientific side and the environmental crisis we've got going on, or whether it's the animal welfare side and roadside zoos and inhumane conditions that are continuing to go on, should be far more important to all of us together than any differences we have amongst ourselves.
And then just what we can do together. Somebody made reference to 96 Elephants, which was WCS started it. AZA embraced it. We got aquariums. We got people from outside AZA, and simply put, we basically shut down domestic ivory trade in the U.S., which was, to my surprise, the second largest consumer of ivory in the world. We also managed to make an impact on China, where China decided to do the same thing. You know, if Dan Ash was still here, I'd ask him, we destroyed how many tons of ivory? China destroyed that many tons plus one more, because they wanted to do us that much better, which is the kind of competition that we wanted. We did that with our staff, with our members, with the visitors that come. We did that through advocacy, through getting the people that we talk to write letters to their politicians to get this done. We're in an immensely powerful group for wildlife. I tried to make that point before about the $186 million a year. People aren't doing that. CI, other conservation groups, they're changing their focus. They're not working with species. There's not that many people working with species anymore. We are. And you know, we spend a lot of time talking about individual animals and welfare, and that's important. We have to do that. We owe that to them. But we have another responsibility too. We care for individual animals, but we manage and sustain species. And that's what we have to hammer home to people. Some of them can't all be returned to the wild, but we take the science, the data, the knowledge that we get from managing these species to the wild and apply that to the wild situation to help these animals. So our role is bigger than what people think of just keeping animals in zoos for people to look at, and we have to hammer that home.
And I just want to add, my observation during the last 3 days was that especially the welfare guys and the ones from the media, they were always talking about Harambe the gorilla and Marius the giraffe. No one was talking about Teddy the toad and Billy the barley starling. You know, and that is exactly, we keep charismatic animals in our collections as ambassadors, but these are only a few species we work with. The most number of species are ugly, boring, brownish animals, and we want to save them. And I think that is something we have to make clear to everyone, that it's not only about the elephant and the tiger, it's about everything, and we take care of, and I think that is something we have to work on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for everybody for your participation. And we're going to turn it over to the closing group.